The first lesson every strategist in the Orion Coalition learns is simple. Technology wins wars. For thousands of cycles, that belief shaped the galaxy. Civilizations rose and fell based on the sophistication of their weapons, the precision of their fleets, and the elegance of their equations. Entire star systems surrendered without resistance the moment coalition warships appeared in orbit. Because superior minds created superior tools, and superior tools always won. Or so we believed. I am Professor Kyle Thar of the Thalrex, Senior Instructor at the Galactic Strategic Academy, an institution built upon that very principle. Our academy stands within a gravity-regulated citadel orbiting the luminous world of Arcanus Prime, where the brightest military minds of the Coalition gather to master the science of victory. Every cadet who enters these halls represents a civilization that has conquered something. A planet, a system, sometimes an entire species. The Velkari cadets possess reflexes faster than most targeting computers. The amphibious Draylans can process tactical probabilities in seconds. The towering insectoid Kareth possess strategic memory banks rivaling artificial intelligence. They are the pinnacle of evolution and engineering, and they are the future generals of the galaxy. On the morning the human arrived, I believed I understood every variable in the equation of war. I was wrong. The first indication of disruption came when the admissions council delivered a message to my chamber, one marked with the highest level of coalition authorization. A new cadet had been approved for the academy. The species designation immediately caught my attention. Human. I reviewed the file twice, convinced it must be an administrative error. Humanity was barely recognized as a minor interstellar civilization. Their ships relied on crude propulsion systems. Their weapons still used chemical reactions rather than controlled plasma. By every measurable standard, they were centuries behind the Coalition. And yet, their records were deeply unsettling. Earth was classified as a Class 12 hazard world, a category reserved for planets where environmental instability alone could eliminate most developing species. Violent atmospheric storms capable of leveling cities, seismic shifts powerful enough to fracture continents, predatory megafauna that evolved specifically to hunt intelligent life. And then there was the gravity. Earth's gravitational pull measured nearly 1.3 standard galactic units, a crushing force that would render most coalition species immobile. Yet humans had evolved within it. Not only survived, thrived. Even more concerning were their historical conflict records. Despite possessing primitive technology, humanity's military archives displayed an alarming pattern. Time and time again, simulations placed them against more advanced opponents. And somehow, they won. Not through superior firepower, not through numerical advantage, but through something far more unpredictable: adaptation. It was a trait rarely seen among advanced civilizations. Most species, once they achieved technological superiority, stopped evolving creatively. Their machines solved their problems. Humans, however, had spent millennia surviving without such advantages, which meant their greatest weapon was not technology. It was improvisation. I first saw the human during the Academy's morning assembly. The lecture chamber was immense, rows of tactical platforms arranged in descending arcs beneath a ceiling of hovering simulation drones. Students from 27 coalition species filled the room. Towering warriors with armored carapaces, fluid-bodied tacticians whose skin shifted color with emotion, cybernetic scholars whose neural implants glowed softly beneath translucent skull plates. And among them, one human. She sat quietly near the center row, reviewing a datapad with focused concentration. Her name was Mara Vance. At first glance, she appeared unremarkable. Her species lacked natural armor. Her skeletal frame was smaller than most cadets present. Her neural readings suggested cognitive ability slightly above Coalition baseline, but far below the Academy's usual standards. Several students noticed her immediately. Whispers spread through the chamber like static across a communication grid. A human? Impossible. They barely qualify for coalition membership. I remained silent, because something about the situation disturbed me. Humans did not enter environments where they were outmatched unless they believed they could win. It was a recurring pattern in their historical conflicts. They would study, wait, then strike when no one expected it. The assembly began with the usual introduction protocols. Each instructor presented the core philosophy of their tactical division. My own lecture concerned the fundamental principle of modern warfare: predictability. Superior civilizations created systems so advanced that outcomes became mathematically inevitable. Battles were no longer chaotic struggles. They were calculations. But as I spoke, I noticed something unusual. The human was not focusing on the lecture. She was observing the room. Her eyes moved slowly across the chamber, studying the drones hovering above us, the tactical consoles embedded in each desk, the fabrication chambers built into the rear wall. She was analyzing the environment, not the lesson. The realization sent a strange ripple through my crystalline neural lattice. Predators study environments before hunts. Humans were not classified as predators by coalition standards. Yet their eyes suggested otherwise. When the lecture ended, the students began preparing for their first practical exercise, weapon creation theory, an assignment designed to test creativity under creative material constraints. It was a simple task by academy standards. But as I watched the humans stand and walk calmly towards the fabrication chamber, a strange thought entered my mind. Perhaps we had misunderstood the species entirely. Perhaps the real danger of humans was not their technology or their resilience, but something far older, something that had allowed them to survive a world designed to destroy them. Because when humans entered unfamiliar territory, they did not simply observe, they learned how to use it. And the first lesson of the Galactic Strategic Academy was about to become something far more dangerous than an academic exercise. It was about to become a demonstration that would force the Orion Coalition to confront a terrifying possibility, that perhaps technology was never the most important weapon in the galaxy. If the Galactic Strategic Academy was the mind of the Orion Coalition, then the tactical chamber was its beating heart. War was studied here the way primitive civilizations studied weather, carefully, scientifically, with the understanding that even the smallest miscalculation could mean catastrophe. The chamber itself had been engineered to simulate battle conditions for dozens of species simultaneously. Gravity modulators hummed beneath the floor panels, adjusting the pole of the room depending on the biological needs of its occupants. Above us, hundreds of small tactical drones drifted silently through the air like patient predators. Their sensors tracked every movement in the chamber, recording every decision made by every cadet. Nothing here went unnoticed, not even the human. She entered the room quietly, her footsteps dull against the alloy flooring. Compared to the towering forms around her, she seemed almost fragile. Many coalition species evolved natural defenses, armor plating, venom sacs, reinforced bone structures. Humans had none of these. Their skin was soft, their bodies comparatively slow, their natural weaponry non-existent. It did not take long for the whispers to begin. I heard them easily through the chamber's acoustic processors. The human will fail the first simulation. Earth's gravity makes them strong, but their minds are primitive. Why allow such a species to study strategy? A group of Velkari cadets, reptilian beings known for their lightning reflexes, watched the human with open amusement.
Their species had perfected combat prediction algorithms centuries ago. In their view, strategy had become a mathematical science. There was no room in such calculations for improvisation, especially not from a species barely capable of interstellar travel. The human ignored them. Her name, according to the Academy records, was Mara Vance. She chose a seat near the far end of the chamber, placing her datapad on the console before her. Unlike most cadets, she did not immediately activate the tactical interface. Instead, she watched. Her eyes moved slowly across the chamber as if mapping it piece by piece. The drones, the consoles, the fabrication chambers built into the walls, the supply lockers used during engineering exercises. It was not the behavior of a confused student. It was the behavior of someone collecting information. That detail alone drew my attention. Most advanced species relied heavily on their equipment. When presented with a new tool, they immediately began testing its capabilities. They trusted machines to provide the answers. Humans, however, had evolved under different conditions. Their machines were new, their instincts were ancient, and ancient instincts could be unpredictable. I began the lesson with a simple demonstration. A holographic battlefield materialized above the central platform, depicting a simulated planetary invasion. Warships descended from orbit while mechanized infantry advanced across a hostile terrain grid. The students leaned forward with immediate interest. War was their language. Today, I announced, my crystalline voice echoing through the chamber, we examine the relationship between intellect and weaponry. The holographic battlefield shifted, zooming toward a ground conflict between two technologically advanced armies. Across the coalition, military superiority is determined by three factors: energy output, targeting precision, and strategic coordination. Several cadets nodded. These were fundamental principles. Primitive civilizations rely on crude projectile weapons, I added, projecting an image of early chemical firearms used by various species throughout history. These technologies become obsolete once directed energy systems are developed. The hologram changed again, now displaying elegant plasma accelerators and gravitational disruption cannons. These, I said, represent the standard armaments of modern warfare. The class observed in respectful silence, except for one, the human. She was not watching the hologram, she was watching the drones above us. Curious, very curious. I activated the next phase of the lesson. Your first assignment of the term is weapon creation theory. A ripple of excitement spread through the chamber. Each cadet will construct a functional weapon prototype using only the materials provided in the fabrication chamber behind you. The rear wall of the chamber opened with a low mechanical hum. Inside were shelves filled with simple components, structural alloys, flexible fiber cords, composite rods, and basic electronic modules. Nothing advanced, nothing sophisticated. That seems unnecessarily restrictive, a Valkyrie cadet said, his scaled crest twitching with mild irritation. I turned toward him. War rarely provides perfect resources, I replied. A true strategist adapts. The class began moving immediately. Students rushed toward the fabrication chamber, their minds already calculating designs. I watched as several cadets began assembling miniature plasma emitters using improvised energy cells. Others experimented with gravitic pulse generators. Advanced species always sought advanced solutions. Then I looked toward the human. She had not moved. She remained seated, observing the room. Several minutes passed before she finally stood. When she did not hurry toward the fabrication chamber like the others. Instead, she walked slowly, her gaze drifting across the shelves of materials, examining, evaluating, selecting. She picked up a thin composite rod first, then a coil of fiber cord, finally a curved strip of flexible alloy. That was all. No electronics, no power modules, no targeting processors. A nearby Kareth cadet noticed her selection and emitted a series of amused clicks. Is the human constructing a toy? Laughter spread across the fabrication chamber. The human did not react. She carried her materials back to her station and began working with quiet focus. Her hands moved with surprising precision, bending the alloy strip slowly while tying the fiber cord between its ends. The shape forming in her hands was unfamiliar to most of the students, but not to me. Something about the design stirred distant fragments of archived historical data. Primitive projectile systems, energy storage through tension. Simple, elegant, dangerously efficient. I opened a private recording channel and began dictating notes into my research log. Observation: human cadet demonstrates delayed response to assignment parameters. I paused, watching her tighten the cord across the curved alloy. Subject appears to prioritize environmental study before initiating construction. The other cadets were already testing their prototypes. Small flashes of plasma flickered across the chamber as experimental weapons discharged harmless energy bursts toward practice targets. Yet the human remained silent, patient, focused. I continued my report. Human behavioral trait, extended observation phase before action. Another pause. Because the more I watched her, the more I became uneasy. Among advanced species, patience was rare. Technology had accelerated decision-making processes to such a degree that hesitation was often viewed as inefficiency. But in nature, patience meant something entirely different. Predators waited. Predators studied their surroundings. Predators chose the perfect moment to strike. My crystalline mind processed the implications carefully. The galaxy had spent centuries analyzing human technology, their ships, their weapons, their infrastructure. But perhaps we had overlooked something more important. Perhaps humanity's greatest advantage was not their tools, but the instincts they had developed long before they possessed tools at all. Across the room, Mara Vance finished tying the final knot in the strange device she was building. She lifted it slowly, testing the tension of the fiber cord. Then she reached for one of the thin rods lying beside her, and for the first time since entering the chamber, the human smiled. A small, confident expression that sent an unexpected chill through my crystalline structure. Because in that moment, I began to suspect something deeply troubling. The other cadets believed the human was the weakest cadet in the room. They believed she had misunderstood the assignment. They believed she was about to embarrass herself in front of the entire academy. But I had studied the warfare histories of thousands of civilizations, and I had learned a dangerous truth. Sometimes the most primitive weapon is the most effective one. The testing phase would begin soon, and
in every war simulation conducted by the Orion Coalition, there exists a moment that determines the outcome of the entire conflict. Not the first shot, not the largest weapon, but the moment when a commander is forced to work with less than expected. True strategy begins when certainty disappears. That was the purpose of the assignment. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as I activated the next phase of the exercise. Above the central platform, the hovering drones repositioned themselves, their scanning lenses glowing faintly as they prepared to observe the students' work. "Cadets," I announced, allowing my voice to echo through the vast chamber. "Theoretical strategy is meaningless without practical innovation."
The fabrication chambers behind the students hummed quietly as their storage panels opened wider, revealing the full collection of raw materials. Not advanced components, not military-grade hardware, only simple substances. Composite rods, flexible fiber cords, basic structural alloys, fragments of conductive plating, primitive elements by the standards of the coalition. Your objective, I continued, is to construct a functional weapon prototype capable of disabling a standard training drone. One of the drones descended from the ceiling as if summoned by the words themselves. Its spherical body rotated slowly, projecting a blue targeting grid across the chamber. This unit possesses reinforced sensors, limited evasive movement, and standard academy shielding. The cadets leaned forward with anticipation. This exercise will test your ability to apply strategic thinking under material constraints. I paused, allowing the tension to build. Begin. The chamber erupted into motion. Students surged toward the fabrication stations with the urgency of predators rushing toward prey. The moment the assignment began, the tactical chamber transformed into a laboratory of war. Velkari cadets began assembling miniature electromagnetic rail systems using conductive strips and improvised capacitor coils. A Draylen engineer quickly constructed a compact energy pulse generator by layering conductive plating into a crude plasma chamber. Two Kareth strategists collaborated on an experimental gravitic disruptor built from alloy rings and magnetic stabilizers. Even with limited materials, advanced minds could produce terrifying machines. That was the lesson. Technology was the ultimate expression of intelligence. Or, at least, that was the belief held by most civilizations in the coalition. Across the chamber, bursts of light began flashing as students tested their early prototypes. Blue arcs of unstable plasma flickered through the air, while small electromagnetic pulses rattled the nearby consoles. Excitement filled the room. Innovation was unfolding exactly as expected. Except for one workstation. The humans. Mara Vance had approached the fabrication chamber more slowly than the others. While most cadets grabbed materials with immediate confidence, the human had paused at the entrance, watching, studying. Her eyes scanned the shelves with quiet focus, as if measuring possibilities invisible to the others. Then she began selecting materials. Not the conductive plating, not the structural power modules. Instead, she chose something unexpected, a coil of fiber cord, several thin composite rods, and a curved strip of lightweight alloy. That was all. No circuitry, no energy sources, no power converters. Several nearby cadets noticed immediately. A Velkari student leaned closer, his scaled eyelids narrowing with amusement. "Human," he hissed, his voice filled with casual superiority. "You appear to misunderstand the assignment." Mara glanced up briefly. Her expression remained calm. The Velkari continued, gesturing toward the advanced prototypes being assembled around them. "The objective is to build a weapon." More students began watching now, curiosity spreading through the chamber. "What you are holding," the Velkari added with a low chuckle, "appears to be construction waste." Laughter rippled across the room. The human said nothing. Instead, she returned to her station and began working. Her movements were precise, efficient, almost practiced. The curved alloy strip bent slowly under controlled pressure as she adjusted its shape. The fiber cord was tied carefully between the two ends of the strip, creating a taut line that hummed slightly when she tested its tension. Several students gathered nearby, whispering amongst themselves. What primitive device is that? It has no power source, no targeting systems, no firing mechanism. From their perspective, the object was completely nonsensical. I watched from the central platform with growing interest. because while the device looked unfamiliar to most cadets, my historical archives were beginning to recognize it, not as a modern weapon, but as something much older, something that existed long before plasma cannons or gravitic disruptors. The human continued shaping the alloy strip, tightening the fiber cord until the structure curved naturally beneath the tension. Then she picked up one of the thin composite rods. Slowly, thoughtfully, she placed it across the cord and pulled it backward. The curved alloy bent further, storing energy within its flexible frame. Around the chamber, students paused their own work to observe. Even the drones hovering above seemed to adjust their scanning patterns, because suddenly the device made sense, not technologically, but physically. Energy stored through tension, released through motion. Primitive, yet elegant. I felt a faint disturbance ripple through my crystalline neural lattice. Concern. Because across a vast military history of the galaxy, the most effective weapons were not always the most advanced. They were the ones that exploited fundamental physics. The human continued her work in silence. She sharpened the tips of several composite rods using a grinding tool, shaping them into slender projectiles. Each rod was identical, balanced, lightweight, efficient. Meanwhile, the other cadets were still struggling with unstable plasma chambers and overheating electromagnetic coils. Advanced technology demanded complexity. Complexity demanded precision, and precision required time. The human, however, had already finished her device. She lifted it slowly, examining the tension of the cord with quiet satisfaction. The Velkari cadet who had mocked her earlier shook his head in disbelief. You cannot expect that primitive tool to disable a drone. More laughter followed, but I did not laugh, because the more I observed the human's weapon, the more certain I became. This was not a random invention. This was something ancient, something perfected over generations, and ancient designs often survived for a reason. I opened a secure note within my research log. Observation: human weapon design prioritizes mechanical simplicity over technological complexity. Another pause as Mara tested the tension again. Potential advantage: reduced failure points, minimal energy requirements, rapid deployment. The implications continued forming in my mind. Advanced weapons required energy cells, cooling systems, targeting processors. Remove any one of those components and the weapon failed. But Mara's human device required none of those things. Only structure, only physics, only motion. The students around her still believed she had misunderstood the assignment. They believed they were witnessing the failure of a primitive species attempting to compete with advanced civilizations. But I was beginning to suspect something very different. Perhaps humanity had not misunderstood the assignment at all. Perhaps they simply approached it from an entirely different perspective. Because in every simulation where humans defeated superior enemies, they never tried to match advanced technology. They bypassed it. Across the chamber, Mara Vance placed one of the sharpened rods against the cord of her device and drew it backward once more. The curved alloy flexed smoothly beneath the tension, stored energy, waiting to be released. The testing phase of the assignment would begin in moments, and when it did, the cadets of the Galactic Strategic Academy were about to witness something deeply unsettling. Not a display of advanced engineering, but something far more dangerous. The demonstration of a weapon that required nothing except understanding how the universe works. And the human was about to show them exactly how devastating that knowledge could be. The testing phase of the assignment began precisely 17 minutes after the fabrication chambers closed. 17 minutes.
That was how long it took the brightest military minds of 27 civilizations to construct weapons capable of disabling a training drone. By coalition standards, it was impressive. The firing platform rose from the center of the tactical chamber, a circular structure surrounded by hovering drones that served as mobile targets. Each drone drifted slowly through the air, projecting faint targeting grids that shifted unpredictably to simulate battlefield conditions. Above us, the observation drones activated their recording arrays. Every shot would be analyzed, every design archived. The future generals of the Orion Coalition stepped forward one by one. The first cadet was Velkari. His weapon resembled a miniature rail accelerator, two parallel alloy rails connected to a hastily assembled capacitor bank. Crude compared to military models, but effective. He raised the device toward a hovering drone. The capacitors discharged with a sharp electromagnetic crack. A metallic projectile launched across the chamber at blistering speed and struck the drone's sensor cluster. Sparks erupted as the machine spiraled downward toward the floor. Applause rippled through the room. Efficient, predictable, acceptable. The next cadet was Draylin. Their species specialized in plasma technology, and the weapon they constructed reflected that expertise. A compact plasma coil wrapped around a conductive chamber, fed by an unstable energy loop. The weapon hummed as it charged. Then a pulse of brilliant blue energy erupted from its barrel. The drone's shielding flickered for half a second before collapsing entirely. The machine burst into fragments of glowing debris. More approval, more confidence. One after another, the students stepped forward. Gravitic disruptors bent space around their targets. Electromagnetic emitters overloaded the drone's circuitry. Experimental pulse cannons shattered armor plating with violent bursts of compressed energy. Nearly every cadet succeeded, some spectacularly. It was exactly the result the Academy expected. Advanced minds produced advanced weapons. Technology conquered limitations. The demonstration reinforced everything the Coalition believed about warfare. Then the final student approached the platform, the human. A quiet murmur spread through the chamber as Mara Vance stepped forward, carrying her strange device. Even after watching her construct it, most students still seemed uncertain what they were looking at. The weapon was deceptively simple, two curved limbs of lightweight alloy, connected by a stretched fiber cord. In her other hand, she carried several thin composite rods, sharpened at one end. The Velkari cadet who had mocked her earlier could not contain his amusement. That cannot possibly function as a weapon. Laughter echoed around the chamber. Several students leaned forward, eager to watch the inevitable failure. I did not laugh, because the moment the human stepped onto the platform, recognition struck my mind like a sudden gravitational shift. I had seen something like this before, not recently, not in modern warfare, but deep within the historical archives of ancient civilizations. Primitive projectile systems, mechanical energy storage, devices used by early species long before the discovery of controlled energy weapons. But there was something unusual about this particular design: efficiency. The device wasted almost nothing. No heat loss from energy conversion, no vulnerable circuitry, no unstable plasma chambers, just structure and tension. Mara stood calmly at the center of the platform while the observation drones adjusted their positions around her. The hovering training drone across the chamber rotated slowly, its sensors locking onto her position. A faint targeting grid appeared across her chest. Standard procedure. The drone's defensive systems were minimal, but its sensor processors were protected behind reinforced plating. Disabling it required accuracy.
The human lifted her device. She selected one of the thin composite rods and placed it carefully across the fiber cord. Then she pulled the cord backward. The curved alloy limbs bent smoothly beneath the tension. A faint creaking sound echoed through the chamber as the device stored energy within its frame. The students watching began whispering again. What is she doing? There is no propulsion mechanism, no energy discharge. Their confusion was understandable. They were used to weapons powered by reactors and processors, machines that converted vast energy reserves into devastating force. But the human's weapon required none of that. The energy came from something far simpler: muscle, leverage, physics. For a moment, Mara remained completely still, the cord drawn tight, the projectile aligned, her eyes focused on the distant drone. That moment stretched longer than expected. The silence in the chamber deepened. And suddenly I understood something unsettling. The human was not hesitating. She was calculating. Wind resistance within the chamber, distance to target, the subtle drift of the hovering drone. Variables most cadets ignored because their targeting systems solved them automatically. The human solved them manually, with instinct. Then she released the cord. The sound was almost invisible. A sharp snap of tension. The projectile vanished from the bowstring with explosive speed. Several students blinked in confusion. Their eyes had not tracked the movement. The composite rod crossed the chamber in less than a second and struck the drone. Not the armor plating, not the outer sensors, but the central processor node hidden beneath its forward shell. The impact was precise, violently precise. Metal shattered. Sparks erupted as the internal systems collapsed instantly. The machine jerked violently in mid-air before spinning downward in a cascade of electrical fire. It struck the floor with a metallic crash. Silence filled the chamber. Not the polite silence of observation, the stunned silence of disbelief. The Valkyrie cadet who had mocked the human stared at the wreckage with wide reptilian eyes. That is impossible. No one laughed now, because every student in the room understood what they had just witnessed. The human had destroyed the drone without using a single unit of stored energy. No plasma, no electromagnetic acceleration, no advanced targeting systems, just a sharpened rod and tension. I felt a cold realization ripple through my crystalline neural lattice. The weapon the human had built required nothing except materials found on almost any planet in the galaxy: fiber, flexible wood or alloy, a sharpened projectile, and a mind capable of understanding motion. I stepped forward slowly, examining the destroyed drone. The projectile had penetrated the processor housing with terrifying efficiency. The sharpened rod remained embedded deep within the circuitry. Minimal force, maximum damage. Elegant, ancient, dangerous. I turned toward the human. "Mara Vance," I said carefully, "explain your design." She lowered the weapon calmly. "It's called a bow," she replied. Several cadets repeated the unfamiliar word, bow. It stores energy by bending the limbs, gesturing toward the curved alloy frame. When the string is released, the stored energy transfers to the arrow. Arrow, another ancient word. Humans have used them for thousands of years. The chamber remained silent. Thousands of years, which meant that for thousands of years, humans had been refining a weapon powered by nothing but tension and gravity. I looked again at the destroyed drone, at the shattered processor, at the simple projectile that had caused it. A disturbing thought began forming within my mind. The Orion Coalition had spent centuries perfecting energy weapons capable of destroying starships. But those weapons required reactors, supply chains, maintenance crews.
Remove the infrastructure supporting them, and they became useless. The human weapon required none of that, only understanding, only creativity, only physics. And suddenly I realized something deeply unsettling. If humans could defeat advanced drones with sticks and string, then perhaps technology had never been the true measure of military power. Perhaps the real weapon was something far older, the ability to take the simplest tools and turn them into something devastating. Around the chamber, the students were still staring at the wreckage of the drone. The laughter was gone. The arrogance had vanished. In its place was something unfamiliar: respect.
The silence that followed the destruction of the training drone was unlike anything I had experienced in the tactical chamber before. Students at the Galactic Strategic Academy were accustomed to witnessing impressive weapons. Every cycle, cadets produced ingenious designs: experimental pulse cannons, unstable gravity projectors, prototype plasma accelerators. Innovation was expected, but what we had just witnessed was not innovation. It was simplicity defeating sophistication. The shattered drone still smoked faintly on the floor, its internal processors exposed where the human projectile had pierced its armor. Around the chamber, the cadets stared in disbelief. The Valkyrie student who had mocked the human earlier slowly stepped closer to the wreckage, crouching to inspect the damage. His claws carefully extracted the slender composite rod from the drone's processor housing. He held it up in silence. "This," he muttered, his voice uncertain, "is impossible." I watched him carefully. "No," I replied, "only unexpected." The cadets turned toward me. I could see the shift in their expressions. Curiosity had replaced amusement. Respect had replaced arrogance. But respect alone was not enough to prove a theory. One successful shot, even a remarkable one, could still be dismissed as coincidence, luck, chance. And strategy could never depend on luck. So I made a decision. I stepped forward and activated the advanced testing console built into the side of the firing platform. The chamber lights dimmed as a hidden compartment in the ceiling opened with a low mechanical hum. Something larger descended from the shadows above. The cadets immediately recognized it: an instructor-grade combat drone. Unlike the simple training targets used for student exercises, this machine was designed to simulate battlefield conditions against experienced tacticians. Its spherical body was reinforced with layered armor plating. Adaptive plasma shielding flickered faintly across its surface. Multiple propulsion thrusters allowed rapid directional movement. And, most importantly, its reaction speed far exceeded that of the standard drones. A murmur of excitement spread through the chamber. The Valkyrie cadet straightened immediately. "Professor," he said carefully, "that unit cannot be disabled by primitive projectiles." He was correct. Even advanced prototype weapons sometimes struggled against instructor-grade drones, which was exactly why I had chosen it. I turned toward the human. Mara Vance. She stood calmly on the firing platform, her strange weapon still resting in her hands. "Yes, Professor?" I gestured toward the descending drone. "This unit possesses adaptive shields and evasive maneuvering systems." The drone's thrusters ignited softly as it hovered several meters above the platform. Its sensors rotated toward the human, scanning her weapon with quiet mechanical curiosity. "It cannot be disabled by simple projectile force," I continued. The cadets watched closely now. They expected the demonstration to end. After all, the assignment had already been completed successfully. No one expected the human to attempt a second shot. But Mara did something surprising. She lifted the bow again. A ripple of anticipation spread through the chamber. "You intend to fire again?" the Valkyrie cadet asked. The human selected another arrow from the small bundle resting beside her. "If that's allowed." I studied her expression carefully. There was no arrogance, no hesitation, only quiet confidence. I nodded. "Proceed." The instructor drone reacted immediately.
The moment the command was given, its thrusters ignited with a sharp burst of plasma. The machine accelerated across the chamber with sudden speed, faster than the training drones, faster than most species could track with their natural vision. Its shields flared brighter as it began weaving through the air in unpredictable patterns, left, right, upward, downward. The cadets watched in fascination. Even advanced targeting systems would struggle to maintain lock on such a maneuvering target. Several students whispered among themselves, "The human cannot hit that. It is moving too quickly. No projectile weapon could compensate for that velocity." The human remained perfectly still. Her eyes followed the drone's movement carefully. Then she raised the bow. She placed the arrow against the cord and drew it back. Once again, the curved limbs bent beneath the tension, storing energy in silence. But something about her posture had changed. She was not aiming at the drone. She was aiming ahead of it. The Valkyrie cadet frowned. "That is incorrect targeting." Another student spoke quietly. "She has miscalculated the drone's trajectory." Even I felt a moment of uncertainty. The drone's movements were highly erratic. Predicting its exact path required advanced computational assistance. Yet the human did not adjust her aim. She held the bow steady, watching, waiting, calculating. Then she released the cord. The arrow launched across the chamber with the same explosive speed as before, but this time it missed, or at least it appeared to. The projectile passed several meters in front of the drone's current position. A few cadets began to laugh again. "See," the Valkyrie said with relief, "primitive weapon." For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then the drone changed direction. Its thrusters fired as it accelerated forward, directly into the arrow's path. The impact was catastrophic. The sharpened projectile slammed into the drone's forward propulsion unit with devastating force. The thruster housing shattered instantly, sending fragments of metal spinning through the air. The drone's propulsion system failed. Its shields flickered wildly as the machine lost stability. Then gravity took control. The combat drone spiraled downward in a shower of sparks, crashing violently on the chamber floor beside the remains of the first target. The laughter vanished instantly. Shock filled the room. Because this time, the human had not simply fired a weapon, she had predicted the drone's movement, anticipated its trajectory, and used the drone's own speed against it. I stared at the wreckage in silence. Then slowly, very slowly, the truth began assembling itself inside my mind. Humans did not rely on physical superiority. They did not rely on technological advantage. They relied on something far more subtle: intuition. The ability to observe patterns, predict motion, understand cause and effect without requiring complex machines to calculate it. Mara lowered her bow. The chamber remained silent. The Valkyrie cadet looked from the destroyed drone to the arrow embedded in its propulsion unit. "But," he said quietly, "how?" The human shrugged slightly. "It's basic archery." The word meant nothing to most of the cadets, but to me its implications were staggering, because what the human had just demonstrated was not simply marksmanship, it was strategy. She had allowed the drone to defeat itself. She had transformed its speed into the very force that destroyed it. And suddenly, I understood something profoundly unsettling about humanity. Their weapons were not their greatest strength. Their machines were not their advantage. Their true power lay somewhere else entirely. Inside their minds. Inside the strange instinct that allowed them to predict chaos and shape it into opportunity. Technology created power, but intuition created victory. I turned slowly toward the students surrounding the firing platform. "You have just witnessed a fundamental principle of warfare." My voice echoed across the silent chamber. "Superior strength is not required to defeat a powerful opponent." I gestured toward the two destroyed drones lying on the floor. "Only superior understanding." The cadets stared at the human with new expressions now. Not amusement, not curiosity, something deeper, something closer to realization, because they were beginning to understand the lesson I had just learned myself. Humanity had spent thousands of years surviving on a world where strength alone was not enough, where technology was not always available, where survival depended on improvisation, prediction, and creativity. And that experience had shaped them into something very dangerous, a species capable of turning the universe itself into a weapon. The human gathered her arrows quietly. The bow rested comfortably in her hand, a weapon built from the simplest materials imaginable, yet capable of defeating machines worth millions of coalition credits. I watched her carefully as she stepped down from the firing platform, because another thought had begun forming inside my mind, a disturbing one. If a human cadet could do this in a classroom, what could a human soldier do on a battlefield? And more importantly, what could an entire civilization of humans accomplish when they decided to win?
The tactical chamber did not recover immediately. Even long after the second drone had crashed to the floor, the silence remained heavy in the air. Smoke still drifted upward from the damaged propulsion unit of the Instructor drone. Small electrical sparks flickered from the exposed circuitry before finally fading into darkness. 2 machines lay destroyed on the chamber floor, one by a primitive arrow, the other by a prediction. Around the platform, the cadets of the Galactic Strategic Academy stood frozen, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. For the first time since the Academy had been founded, a weapon with no power source had defeated advanced combat systems. And in the center of the platform, the human stood quietly holding it. The bow rested easily in Maravance's hand. It was a simple device. 2 curved limbs, a stretched fiber cord, and a collection of thin projectiles. Nothing about it suggested sophistication. Nothing about it suggested military dominance. Yet moments earlier, that same object had destroyed 2 drones worth more than the annual defense budget of several developing civilizations. A murmur slowly began spreading through the chamber. How is this possible? It violates tactical logic. There is no targeting processor. One of the Draylen cadets stepped closer to the firing platform, studying the bow with visible confusion. Our species mastered plasma weaponry within 3 centuries of achieving industrial technology, he said slowly. Why would any civilization continue using such a primitive tool? It was a reasonable question, one that revealed a deeper misunderstanding shared by nearly every advanced species in the Orion Coalition. I stepped forward slowly, my crystalline limbs reflecting the chamber's dim lighting. Because their world demanded it, I replied. The cadets turned toward me. Most coalition civilizations followed a similar evolutionary path. Once basic industry was achieved, technological advancement accelerated rapidly. Energy systems replaced manual labor. Automation replaced survival instincts. Weapons evolved alongside machines. Primitive tools became obsolete almost immediately. It was an efficient path towards progress, but efficiency has consequences. You advanced too quickly, I said quietly. Several cadets frowned. Your civilizations never required simple solutions for very long, I explained. You discovered plasma reactors before mastering mechanical tension. You invented gravitic propulsion before perfecting the physics of thrown projectiles. The Velkari cadet looked down at the arrow still embedded in the drone's propulsion unit. So we skipped steps? Yes, I answered, and those steps shaped humanity. I turned toward Mara. Earth is not a stable world. The students listened closely now. It is a planet defined by instability, violent weather systems, shifting ecosystems, predators capable of hunting intelligent life, and gravity strong enough to exhaust most coalition species within minutes. Human civilization evolved in an environment where survival required constant adaptation. Before complex machines existed, humans were forced to invent. Ropes became traps, sticks became spears, stone became blades. Each tool was refined through necessity. Each invention improved the next. Eventually, I continued, a simple idea emerged. A curved piece of flexible wood, a length of fiber, a sharpened projectile. Energy stored through tension, released through motion. The bow, one of the most efficient projectile systems ever created by a developing species, and humans had spent thousands of years perfecting it. The Draylen cadet shook his head slowly. But if they possessed such an effective weapon, why abandon it? Another student asked. The human spoke before I could answer. We didn't abandon it, Mara said calmly. The chamber grew quiet again. We just built better versions. She held up one of the arrows. Guns are basically the same idea, stored energy launching a projectile. A few cadets exchanged uneasy glances. She was correct. Projectile weapons were still common across the galaxy, but the concept behind them had been forgotten. Machines handled the physics. Machines calculated the trajectory. Machines made the decisions. Humans, however, had learned to do those calculations themselves. That difference was beginning to concern me. Because technology could fail, power systems could collapse, supply chains could be destroyed, but instincts remained. I stepped onto the firing platform and approached the human, Mara Vance. She straightened slightly. Yes, Professor? I examined the bow closely. Elegant, efficient, dangerous. I have completed the assignment, I said carefully. I paused for a moment before adding the final words. Beyond expectation. The cadets watched silently. For them, the exercise had revealed something unsettling. For me, it had revealed something far more significant. I activated a private recording channel within my neural archive, a report intended for the Galactic Strategic Council. My crystalline processors carefully structured the message. Subject: human strategic capabilities. I glanced once more at the destroyed drones before continuing. Observation: human military thinking demonstrates extreme adaptability when confronted with limited resources. Across the chamber, Mara returned to her station, calmly placing the bow on the console. The student still stared at it as if it were some alien artifact, but it was not alien. It was simply human. I continued recording. Conclusion: humanity's greatest advantage is not technological superiority. A pause, because the next words carried significant implications. Primary advantage: adaptability. Advanced civilizations often relied on predictable systems, predictable weapons, predictable strategies. Humans did not. Humans invented new solutions whenever old ones failed, and that made them something every strategist feared: unpredictable. I finished the report with a final statement. Assessment: species classified as highly dangerous in asymmetrical conflict scenarios. Because across the entire history of warfare, one rule had always remained true. If you could predict your enemy, you could defeat them. But if you could not predict them, victory became impossible. I closed the recording and looked out across the silent chamber. The cadets were still watching the human, still processing the lesson they had just witnessed. They had expected to learn about weapon design. Instead, they had learned something far more unsettling. Technology did not create victory. Creativity did. And humanity possessed that quality in terrifying abundance. The lesson had ended, but the implications of that lesson were only beginning. Because the Orion Coalition had just discovered something about the newest species in the galaxy. Something that would reshape every future battlefield. Humans were not the strongest civilization. They were not the most advanced. But they possessed a trait few species ever developed: the ability to take nothing and turn it into a weapon. And once the galaxy truly understood that, humanity would never again be underestimated. The report left the Academy 3 days after the incident. It traveled quietly through the encrypted data channels of the Orion Coalition, passing through military archives, intelligence networks, and strategic command centers scattered across dozens of star systems. At first, it appeared routine: a training exercise, a classroom demonstration, a minor note within the endless stream of military observations recorded each cycle. But the footage attached to the report changed everything. Strategists began watching it. Then they watched it again. And again. Across the vast territories of the Coalition, some of the most experienced military minds in the galaxy gathered inside war rooms and tactical chambers to observe the same moment repeatedly. The moment a human cadet stepped onto a firing platform holding a weapon made from the simplest materials imaginable. Fiber, flexible alloy, a sharpened rod. The analysts watched carefully as the primitive device launched its projectile across the chamber. They observed the arrow striking the training drone. They studied the second shot even more closely, frame by frame. Trajectory calculations filled the tactical displays, velocity predictions, impact timing. And every time they reached the same conclusion. The human had not relied on technology. She had relied on understanding. Understanding motion, understanding physics, understanding her enemy. One senior strategist from the Valkyrie War Command paused the footage during the second shot, the moment when the arrow passed harmlessly through empty space. "Here," he said quietly, "explain this." A Draylen analyst adjusted the simulation. "The projectile did not miss," she replied. "It intercepted the drone's predicted path." The Valkyrie strategist leaned back slowly. So the human anticipated its maneuver. Yes. Without targeting systems? Yes. Silence filled the room, because that detail disturbed them more than the weapon itself. Machines could predict trajectories. Machines could analyze motion, but machines required processors, energy, infrastructure. The human required none of those things. She simply knew. The report spread further, across the command halls of the Coalition's defensive fleets, across the archives of planetary military councils, across the strategic planning divisions responsible for calculating the outcome of potential interstellar wars. Everywhere the same question emerged. If a human student could do this in a classroom, what could humanity do on a battlefield? One simulation officer ran the scenario again using a modified model. He removed energy weapons from both sides, removed advanced targeting systems, removed automated support networks. The results surprised everyone. Human victory rates increased dramatically, because humans did not require technological superiority to function effectively. They required only the ability to improvise. The final strategic conclusion was eventually summarized in a single line added to the official report, a sentence so simple that many commanders initially dismissed it. But the more they studied the footage, the more accurate it appeared. Technological superiority does not guarantee victory, because wars were not won by machines. Machines were tools. Machines could be destroyed. Machines could fail. Wars were won by something far more difficult to eliminate: minds. Minds capable of inventing something new when the old solution stopped working. And among all known civilizations in the Orion Coalition, one species possessed that ability more naturally than any other: humans. Their history proved it. A species born on a violent world. A civilization forced to invent solutions with limited resources. A culture built on adaptation, creativity, and relentless problem-solving. Other civilizations had perfected technology. Humans had perfected improvisation. And improvisation could not be predicted. Far away from the Coalition strategic councils, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary star, life continued as it always had. Billions of humans moved through their daily routines, working, building, inventing, arguing, dreaming. Most of them had no idea that the galaxy was watching. No idea that their species had just altered the strategic calculations of dozens of interstellar civilizations. No idea that a single classroom demonstration had forced the Orion Coalition to reconsider the future of warfare. But deep inside the archives of the Galactic Strategic Council, the final assessment remained permanently recorded. Humanity was not the strongest species, nor the most advanced. Their fleets were smaller, their weapons less sophisticated,
their technology still evolving. But they possessed something far rarer, a trait the universe produces only occasionally: the ability to see possibility where others saw limitation, to invent solutions where others relied on machines, to take the simplest materials imaginable and turn them into something devastating. Because humans had spent their entire history mastering one skill above all others: turning nothing into a weapon. And now that the galaxy had finally recognized that truth, no strategist would ever look at humanity the same way again.